Many don't often think that the written word is a form of graphic design alone, but good designers can use typography as a way to express emotion through the letter forms themselves. This form of the art is commonly used for printed works, advertisements, and brand logos, and there are two designers that stood out during the 20th century for their exceptional use of typography in order to convey feeling through text. Their names were Paul Rand and Chip Kidd, and each changed the face of typeface through their unique designs. Paul Rand was born Peretz Rosenbaum in Brooklyn, New York on August 15, 1914. Rand began his career creating stock images and page layouts for various publications in the mid-1930s. He quickly landed a full-time position at Apparel Arts magazine in 1936, and by the next year he took over as the art director for Esquire magazine at the mere age of 23. He also designed several acclaimed covers of Direction magazine. During the 1940s into the 50s, Rand became the art director of the William H. Weintraub Advertising Agency in New York. By the 1950s and 60s, Rand began to truly establish himself as an artist, specifically contributing to many major corporate logos that are still in use to this day, including ABC, UPS, and IBM. Though his education was rooted in avant-garde, Rand had a knack for clean, minimalistic lines, and he would soon become a major pioneer within the modernist movement. Movements in particular that were often found to be inspirations for Rand included constructivism, which called for precise technical analysis, Bauhaus, which aimed to recombine creativity and manufacturing, Distilge, which sought to reflect harmony and order, employing grid layouts and often using only black and white, and his use of the Swiss style, which emphasized cleanliness with the use of asymmetric layouts and grids. Rand himself once explained that a logo cannot survive unless it is designed with the utmost simplicity and restraint. He also said that simplicity is not the goal, it is the byproduct of a good idea and modest expectations. Steve Jobs, creator of Apple and once a client of Rand's, praised him as the greatest living graphic designer. Paul Rand's work continued well into the end of the 20th century, until his battle with cancer unfortunately took his life on November 26, 1996, while in Norwalk, Connecticut. Paul Rand's influence has expanded through many mediums of the art world, but it truly resonates in another famous designer's work, contemporary designer, editor, and author Chip Kidd. Born on September 12, 1964, in Shillington, Pennsylvania, Chip was just like any other young man at the time. He was a fan of comic books. Particularly taken with the infamous Batman comic series distributed by DC Comics, Kidd would actually go on to write and design the artwork for his idol stories himself, amongst many other projects. Kidd studied graphic design at Pennsylvania State University, and he graduated in 1986. He was hired as a junior assistant at the Knopf Publishing House in New York City. By the early 2000s, Chip had made over 1,500 book jackets for Knopf alone, not including numerous freelance projects. Kidd once told USA Today that in the late 1980s, book covers were replacing record album covers as the cool, neat thing for graphic designers to make. Though Kidd is known for his creatively simplistic work, he cites his inspiration coming from reading each individual novel, whereby afterwards he contacts the author with his ideas. He has worked with a wide variety of notable authors, many being New York Times bestsellers. Oftentimes, his work has been considered unconventional, as well as humorous and idiosyncratic. One of his most famous book covers was for Michael Crichton's critically acclaimed novel, Jurassic Park, which also subsequently became the logo for the major motion picture that followed only 3 years after the book's publication. On top of his vast achievements as a graphic designer, Chip Kidd is also a New York Times best-selling author himself. Over the last 30 years, he has published 4 novels, several coffee table books, numerous magazine articles, and written for DC Comics. Along with being an accomplished writer, he is also an editor and the art director of Pantheon graphic novels. Chip also often writes for several publications, including the New York Times, Vogue, and Entertainment Weekly. Kid's work stretches across many mediums, and he has often received critical acclaim as well as several prestigious awards, including the American Institute of Graphic Arts Medal, the National Design Award for Communication, and the International Center of Photography's Infinity Award for Design. Along with lectures presented at Princeton, Yale, and Harvard, he has also been a featured speaker on the internet informative video site TED Talks.
Augustin Burroughs wrote a memoir called This, and it's about his time in rehab. In his 20s, he was a hotshot ad executive, and as Mad Men has told us, a raging alcoholic. He did not think so, however, but his co-workers did an intervention, and they said, you are going to rehab, or you will be fired and you will die. Now, to me, this was always going to be a typographic solution, what I would call the opposite of Type 101. What does that mean? Usually on the first day of Introduction to Typography, you get the assignment of select a word and make it look like what it says it is. So that's Type 101, right? Very simple stuff. This is going to be the opposite of that. I want this book to look like it's lying to you, desperately and hopelessly, the way an alcoholic would. The answer was the most low-tech thing you can imagine. I set up the type, I printed it out on an Epson printer with water-soluble ink, taped it to the wall, and threw a bucket of water at it. Presto. Then when we went to press, the printer put a spot gloss on the ink, and it really looked like it was running. Not long after it came out, Augustin was waylaid in an airport, and he was hiding out in the bookstore, spying on who was buying his books. And this woman came up to it, and she squinted, and she took it to the register, and she said to the man behind the counter, "This one's ruined." And the guy behind the counter said, "I know, lady, they all came in that way." Now that's a good printing job.
Chip Kidd is a prominent staple in modern pop culture. We see his work everywhere, and his influence will strike a chord with many generations to come. Although his work is various, his biggest achievements would still be his book designs. Often seen in his book covers are several influences taken from the modernist movements, including constructivism as well as futurism. Kidd himself has said often the simplest and most effective solutions aren't dictated by style. This quote is very similar to Paul Rand's quote about simplicity and restraint, which is just one of the many comparisons of Kidd's and Rand's design styles. Both artists often use clean-cut sans serif typefaces, with rounded edges and not too sharp of points, easily seen in the A's of both Bret Easton Ellis covers and Batman Death by Design from Kidd's aspect, as well as in Rand's logos, specifically UPS and IBM. You'll see that they have Swiss-style predominant typefaces in a lot of their work. If you compare Rand's ABC logo, which is a simple black circle with white lettering over top, to Kidd's cover for Glitz by Elmore Leonard, you'll see similarities, especially with the use of a colored circle background to emphasize the type. Kidd uses a solid red background with black lettering over top, but the effect is essentially the same. It spells out the word intense, which really makes it pop out. Again with Glitz, he uses a simple, minimalistic typeface that is ever so slightly grunged up in order to make the title appear ironic. These small and simple effects really help both Rand and Kidd's work pop out. If you look at the R in Elmore, you see the slight extension of it, which is good for helping emphasize little subtleties, which also draws your eye to the other books of Leonard's mentioned below. You'll see something similar in Kidd's Jurassic Park book cover. The J and the P are slightly extended, just past the rest of the letters. It has a similar idea of the lines drawing you straight to the T-Rex shape. The use of text as leading lines are simple and effective for both of our artists. The Swiss-style typeface became a standard in modernism art for a reason. It's simple, it's clean, it's effective. It's easy to translate in any language. It's very simple. It doesn't confuse. You'll always know what letter represents what. And both Paul Rand and Chip Kidd understood that. They both have mentioned the idea of keeping things simple because that usually speaks louder, especially considering the advertising world. You want to captivate your audience, and they both were very good at using text in the simplest of forms to draw you in. Most of the time not even needing visual representation of something else. The text alone does enough to bring you in. While both have strong modernist influences, Chip Kidd's work also highlights areas of the postmodern art movement, especially considering his influences from pop culture, as well as the influences his work has caused on pop culture and postmodern artists. Hints of pop art can be seen through his comic book work, along with conceptual art and lowbrow art seen commonly in his book cover designs. Paul Rand didn't work much with computer or digital art, which has become an artistic movement within itself, one that is certainly utilized by Chip Kidd. Paul Rand, however, was a pioneer of Swiss style and the modernist movement, so without his impact, Chip Kidd may have never succumbed to such a style. Thus, the ultimate difference in these two artists' work is simply being an era apart. Rand was at the height of his fame when Kidd was born, so ultimately the two could have never truly competed against one another. Both Paul Rand and Chip Kidd have left their mark on thousands of blooming artists throughout the world and will continue to do so for many years. They both share the idea that art can speak more than words, but using words in their art can speak louder than the images themselves.